Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our sixth annual conspiracy conference. And today's speaker is Rayelan Allan. Got it, right? And Rayelan Allan is an author, lecturer, welcome,
Publisher.
and a publisher of Rumor Mills News. She is well known for her interest in the environment, mass media, esoteric history, and human rights. And her husband, I'm going to mispronounce it, Gunther Rusbacher, no,
Yes,
was the October Sunrise pilot who was in prison 2 days after they were married, and she will share more information on that. For years, Rayelan worked to keep Gunther alive by publicizing his status as a political prisoner of the Bush administration. She has further investigations. She's uncovered assassinations, satanic cults, and media programming. She has two websites. It's www.rumormillsnews.com, and the other one is called obergonchronicles.com. And her presentation today is Obergon Chronicles. I want to put it in Spanish, but
Obergon.
Is that it?
No, it isn't.
Oh, Obergon Chronicles. Yeah.
Obergon Chronicles.
Obergon.
But I would like to one day research Obergon, because who knows, there may very well be a connection.
Right.
Because Obergon is Syrian. Syrians, according to my sources, discovered the Canary Islands, which are part of Spain, and I'm not sure where the Obergon region
Obergon
is.
in Mexico.
Well, it's in Spain first, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And so there may very well be a connection to Obergon.
Well, I may be related.
Oh, are you an Obergon?
We'll find out.
Yes.
Thank you.
Here is my lecture. Usually, I don't even have one this long. The last time I tried to introduce the Obergon Chronicles was January of 1997. What happened to me and to Gunther at that time was so devastating that I truly have never even recovered from it. In fact, I ran from it and hid for many years. But I'll get into that. Today, most people know me as the publisher of Rumor Mill News. I also have bringemon.org. I took that out hoping that the Republican Party would buy it from me. They never did. Now they're running as fast as they can, as you notice, from Bring 'em On. But it is a site where everybody has a voice. So if you have a voice, if you have something to say, you bring 'em on.org. I've had Rumor Mill News since 1996. My 10th anniversary is coming up on 6/6/06. I just found out the Omen is being released on the same date. I hope that is not an omen. Other people know me as one of the early researchers on the death of Princess Diana. It wasn't more than a day after Diana was murdered that I received a phone call from a man that was so nervous I could barely keep him on the phone. And when I said, slow down, I'm recording this, I can't get all of it. And he almost hung up on me at that time. I said, no, I'm not recording your voice. I'm repeating back, and I'm recording what you have told me. Because he said, I will not talk to you if I know you're recording my voice. So I did not record his voice. He told me a story so incredible about Pont de Alma, where Diana was murdered. He said that it used to be a temple for the goddess Diana, but it was a very special temple, Pont d'Alma, the Bridge of Souls. Ooh, and I get chills every time I talk about that. The Bridge of Souls, it was where the dying went to die. They had a priestess of Diana sitting next to them who would take their soul across the Bridge of Souls, so they did not fall back into the river of reincarnation, so that they could actually free themselves from the reincarnation cycle. And that was one of the things that the man told me. The other thing that he told me is that the death of Diana was going to be used to bring the goddess religion as the main religion, the female-based religion as the main religion. And he said that the New World Order had been trying to do this for many, many years with the goddess Gaia. But Gaia just wasn't catching on. She didn't have a beautiful face. She didn't have a beautiful name. And so what they needed was a beautiful face and a beautiful name. And that became the goddess Diana. And if you look in, once I started reading this, I started doing a lot of research in the goddess Diana and found out that when Christianity began to move up into Europe, many times the churches were built on the temples of the goddess Diana, and the goddess Diana became the Mother Mary. And so many Catholic churches never lost their connection to the goddess. They keep their connection to the goddess through Mary. And so I was told that in the next 100 years, we're going to start having a lot of people channel the goddess Diana. We're going to have visions of the goddess Diana in the sky. One of my very close friends was Serge Monast, who wrote the book Project Bluebeam. Serge talked about technology developed by NASA that can project any image they want on the sky and simultaneously have the voices appear in the heads of everybody that is seeing the vision. And so when at any time that the New World Order wants the population to see Jesus, Mithra, Mohammed, the goddess Diana, or the aliens that are coming to invade all of us, they have got the technology all in place. Shortly before I published this book, Serge died very, very mysteriously. He had been talking to a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Rod Lewis, and suddenly the whole snow in Canada, where he was living at the time he died, the snow turned blue. And then he had a heart attack later that day, massive heart attack, and died instantly. And Rod Lewis and I have talked about this, and the color blue, it was almost like somebody was playing some strange trick on him, or somebody was leaving a clue behind to let us know that Serge's death was not a normal death. So at the moment, most people know me as either the publisher of Rumor Mill News or the author of Diana, Queen of Heaven. But from 1990 to 1993, I was known as something entirely different. And I was vilified throughout the country because I was the wife of the man who claimed he flew George Herbert Walker Bush, back from a meeting in Paris where the Reagan campaign formalized an agreement with Iran. And the agreement was, you hold the hostages until after the November election, and we will make sure that you've got all the weapons, everything that you possibly need to fight your war with Iraq. And so, and just for those of you who are Jimmy Carter fans, you need to know that Jimmy Carter was negotiating just as fast and furiously behind the scenes, and he was promising Iran anything that they wanted to win their war. But for some reason, the Ayatollah preferred the Reagan people to Jimmy Carter, and you know the rest. We had George Herbert Walker Bush for 8 years under the Reagan administration. He was the de facto president. In case you didn't know that, on the day Reagan was the attempt to assassinate him, I'm sure all of you know that the man Hinckley was having lunch with a member of the Bush family. Excuse me. The Bush family, Hinckley's parents were having lunch with the Bush family. And so the Hinkleys and the Bushes were very, very connected. During the assassination, Nancy Reagan was literally held hostage in the Oval Office until she made the agreement that Reagan was only a figurehead, and they took orders from George Herbert Walker Bush. And so we had Bush as president for 8 years, then we had him as president for 4 years. And then we have had Bush's partner in crime from Mena, Arkansas, as president for another 8 years. So we've had 8, 8, 16 plus 4 is 20. We've had 28 years of George Herbert Walker Bush running this government. That's just the way it is. Okay, so in 1991, I found out that I was married to the October surprise pilot. I had been married to him for 2 years already. I married him in August of 1989. And he was arrested 2 days afterwards. And he stayed in prison here in the United States for 4 years. But up until May of 1991, I had no idea who I had married. I knew he was a CIA operative. I knew he was a naval officer. I had known him for many, many years before we married. But in 1991, I received a phone call from Tom Valentine, who does Radio Free America. And Tom said, well, how's it feel to be married to the October surprise pilot? I said, what are you talking about? I'm not married to the October surprise pilot. He says, well, is this Rayelan Rusbacher? I said, yes, it is. You mean your husband didn't bother to tell you what he did in 1980 when he flew Bush back in an SR-71? I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, I think you probably should see the Napa Sentinel. Well, that was in the days before computers. So I called the publisher of the Napa Sentinel. He faxed me down the article that he had just written about my husband being the October surprise pilot. A couple of days before, I'd received a phone call from my husband, and he had told me that he and his boss were flying up, and they were going to take me down to Fort Ord, and they were going to get me my Navy military ID card so that I could have military privileges and get his money, even though he's in prison. He said that we will fly over at about 5:30. We've got to go down to Fort Ord and land, and then we'll drive back up. So at 5:30, exactly on schedule, the black helicopter flew over my house, and it, kind of rocked to say hello to me. And so I got the rest of the hors d'oeuvres, and the Admiral had never been in my house, and I was really getting things prepared. And I've got the television on in the background, and suddenly the news comes on, and there is that black helicopter lying on its side in a field in Fort Ord. It had crashed. I went hysterical because I was certain he was dead. There had been many attempts on his life in prison. So another attempt on his life, I was certain that they had gotten him that time. I called my friend Rodney Stitch. He'd worked with the FAA. I felt that Rodney would know who to call. Well, Rodney didn't know anything, and he was hemming and hawing and said, well, gosh, Rayelan, I don't have any idea who I can possibly call to find this out. But, maybe if you give me a little more time, I can figure it out. So I slammed the phone down on him and called a private number that I had only for emergencies. It was a CIA director it was a station chief of the CIA in St. Louis. I actually did have a private number of the director of Central Intelligence, but I decided to try Roger first because the last time I had tried calling William Webster, I was not put through. And his secretary, after I demanded to know what her name was, hung up on me. And she said, I'm Heather. I can't tell you that. And I said, it's nice, Michelle. Goodbye. I knew who she was. So I chose to call the station chief in St. Louis, my husband's best friend. I said, Roger, Gunter, and the Admiral were on their way to see me. The helicopter they were coming in crashed. He says, I'll get back to you. That was all that I had to say. He said, I'll call you back. About 5 minutes later, and you can imagine what this agony was, 5 minutes later, he calls back and he said, there were 2 naval officers and an Air Force officer killed. And so I'm absolutely certain it was Gunter and his boss. And I'm just there to, I don't know. So for some reason, I picked up the phone and called Terminal Island, the prison where he was. And I said, I was just rambling. I don't even know what I said. I said, there's been a crash. I need to talk to my husband. Friends of his have been killed in a helicopter crash. I need to talk to him. I need to know he's alive. A couple of minutes later, I got a phone call from the prison. Gunter was so incoherent, he could hardly talk. I said, Gunter, the helicopter crashed. And he said, what helicopter? I said, the one you were supposed to be on. Oh my God, they drugged me. He had been drugged, so he was not on that helicopter. Evidently, his boss, who was also not on that helicopter, had some sort of premonition that they were going to be killed. And so they did not go on that helicopter. It was another group of people on the helicopter. I said, Gunter, why did somebody try to kill you? He says, I can't talk about it. Well, he couldn't talk about it to me, but he called Rodney Stitch, and he told Rodney the entire story of him being the October surprise pilot. He gave information that nobody had until that time. And he said to Rodney, whatever you do, do not give this information to anybody unless I'm killed. If I'm killed, then give it to Rayelan. Well, Rodney didn't listen to him. Rodney drove from Walnut Creek over to Napa and gave Harry Martin the tape. Harry Martin worked all night writing the article, and the next day published the story of the October surprise pilot and the attempt on his life. And then the very next day, Harry called Tom Valentine. Tom Valentine called me. I didn't even know that I was married to the October surprise pilot at that time. Well, from that moment on, if I thought our lives had been bad up until that time, from that moment on, there was one attempt on my life after another. I've had cars try to run me off of overpasses, try to run me off of cliffs. I've had gunfights in front of the hotels where I was staying. I have seen the Navy SEALs that were guarding me. I've seen one of them killed. I've seen the people that tried to kill me. I've seen them killed in front of me. At one point, there was a team of assassins coming, 6 of them. I saw them burned to death in an automobile. The very first show that I was on, publicizing Gunter's status as the October surprise pilot, was in San Jose. As I got on the freeway, a van tried to run me off the freeway overpass. A short time later, I heard a huge explosion, and I saw in my rearview mirror this van was on fire and stopped dead in the middle of 280. Then a red Firebird came out of nowhere, tapped his lights 3 times. That was my signal that if you see somebody tap the brake lights 3 times, you glue yourself to their bumper and you do and go wherever they go. Those were my orders from Gunter. And so that's what I did. So up until 1994, when Gunter and I were able to get him safely out of the country, and I believed that I no longer had to worry about his safety or my safety. Up until 1994, I was on the radio, I was on television, I was doing every single thing that I could to publicize the fact that George Bush had committed treason in 1980. Then my husband and I hooked up with Ross Perot, and we were some of the people behind the scenes that provided Ross Perot with enough information to cause him to go in as the third party. And of course, if Ross Perot had not been there, we would have had George Herbert Walker Bush for 8 years at that time. And believe me, I would not be here talking to you right now. I'd be dead. But Bill Clinton got elected, and I breathed a huge sigh of relief because I did not believe that Bill Clinton was going to try to kill me. Let me tell you, I was wrong. The attempts on both of our lives did not stop. It took me a long time to realize that there was really no difference between these two presidents. They are both New World Order presidents. And I apologize to all of you that may have thought that Bill Clinton was different than George Herbert Walker Bush. But then again, this is a conspiracy conference, and so most of you probably have already realized that. But before I was the October surprise pilot, I had a whole life and career. I had a whole life and career of my own here in this area. In the mid 80s, in the mid 80s to 1989, when I married Gunter, I was known as a psychic. I was a body worker, and I was a researcher of esoteric history. And out of that period came the ACM breath coach. This is activated cellular memory, gathering up all the garbage, emotional garbage you're still carrying around with you, and getting rid of it quickly so you don't have to spend 20 years in psychotherapy. The other thing that came out of it was this one, prosperity for the children of light. This is one of many of the Templar meditations for prosperity, for attracting to you what you need at the moment. Not all the money in the world, but what you need to do your particular mission. You never get any more than what you need. And the reason that you never get any more than what you need is to keep you on the straight and narrow. But before these two tapes, there was something else. There was another part of me. And before these two tapes, there were the Obergon Chronicles. And as I said, when I first tried to publish them in 1997 and go forward with the story that I'm going to tell you right now, the results were so devastating to me that I pretty much went underground for a number of years. In the mid-70s, I married the chairman of the physics department at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. My husband, Dr. John Dyer, was the man that created the ASW and EW programs. How many people have even heard of ASW or EW? Warfare. Oh, there are a few. ASW was actually created here at Moffett. And so if you're from the area, you may very well know the ASW. It is anti-submarine warfare programs. The EW is one that a great deal of research went on in Hayward, but it's one that isn't known at all. It's electronic warfare. The first time we even got a glimpse of what EW was about was during the first Persian Gulf War, when all of those troops, they just started surrendering. They were surrendering to cameramen. They were surrendering to everyone. What was happening is something was being beamed into their brains. I have no idea what, but it created such terror in them that they threw down their weapons and they surrendered to whoever it was that would take them as prisoner. And so that was who I married in 1975. At the time I married him, Admiral Sam Linder was the head of the school. And a wonderful admiral. I really enjoyed him. Of all the admirals there, he's the one that I remember the fondest. Many, many years later, Sam was a nickname. His real first name was Isham. And Isham comes from Abraham Lincoln's mother's family. And so he had quite a long history there in this country. Well, one day, as I am walking through my house on the way to feed my dog and cat their breakfast, I hear a voice as loud as you are hearing my voice right now. And that voice said, "Get a pen and a paper, we're going to teach you how to do dictation." And I thought the radio was on. And so I looked around and I saw that there was nothing there. The cat and dog were making so much energy, even if the voice had tried making so much noise, that even if the voice had tried to say something else to me, I wouldn't have been able to hear it over the yelping of the dog and the meowing of the cat. And so I fed them first, walked back in to the dining room, and suddenly there's the voice again. And it said, "Get a pen and a piece of paper. We're going to teach you how to do dictation." And I'm going, oh my God, I really did hear a voice. And, you know, the thoughts, I'm the wife of the chairman of the physics department. You know, we don't, psychics and weirdos hear voices, not us. And I had just finished a degree in psychology, and I'm going, oh my God, I'm all the symptoms of a schizophrenic. I'm hearing voices. Do I go into therapy? What do I do? So the voice comes again, says, "The pen and paper, please." And, you know, you can tell that they're getting very annoyed with me. So I went over to the table and I picked up a pencil. And they said, "We told you to get a pen. If you're going to work with us, not only do you have to take dictation, but you have to listen. You have to follow the orders." And so I picked up, there were two pens. There was an ink pen. My husband always worked with a flowing ink pen to write his notes for his classes. And then there was a ballpoint pen. And I heard the voice say, "Use the ballpoint pen. During this process, your thoughts must be totally focused on what you are doing. If you use the ink pen or a pencil, you will be distracted by the scratching sound." I picked up a white piece of paper. He said, "No, don't use the white paper. The glare is too strong. Use the yellow paper." Okay, so I've got my Bic, I've got my yellow legal pad, and the very first words out of this man's mouth, "My name is Isham, and I'm here with Candor, and we are Candor." Up until this very moment, I thought Candor was another person. But what if he was saying, "I'm here with Candor to teach you how to receive information"? As I said, it wasn't until years later that I found out that Admiral Sam Linder's first name was Isham. I mean, how many people do you know named Isham? Tell me. I have no proof that the voice in my head named Isham was Admiral Isham Linder. I have no proof of that. But the coincidence is awfully big, don't you think? So for a number of years, I worked with different people, channeling information. I became what I thought was a New Age channel. My first teacher was a man named Seamus. You know, the voice in my head, his name was Seamus. And Seamus was more like a psychologist and a spiritual teacher than he was working with me. He wasn't really giving me information to pass on to people. They told me that I had a great deal of psychological damage that had to be undone before I could actually do this work. And so I worked with Mr. for about 2 to 3 years. He was the most wonderful person. I mean, if he had a body, I would have loved to have been married to him, you know, that sort of person. I loved him. And then one day I'm meeting with him at 8:30 in the morning. That was the agreed upon time. And so for 10 years at 8:30 every morning, I sat and for an hour took dictation. Well, one morning he said, "Okay, you've reached the point where you're going to graduate. You're going to go on and get a new teacher." I was devastated. I did not want a new teacher. I loved Mr. I wanted him to stay with me. Well, my new teacher was an entity, a voice named Seamus. And when Mr. would come every morning, it would be so beautiful. It would be, "Greetings to you, my dear friend. Will you join with us and receive the blessings of the day?" It was so beautiful. It was like having a blessing given to me every single morning. Well, when Seamus came through, I'd hear the voice. I could tell he was coming through. It would be, "Get out of the way. It's my turn at the helm." And so then he would come through like that, and I would write down the messages that Seamus would give me. Well, Seamus introduced me to a lot of other people other entities, other spirits on the other side. It was the other entities, other voices, I should say, I shouldn't call them entities, the other voices that are the ones that gave me the stories that make up the first third of the Obergon Chronicles. During that time, I had also written another short story called a short book called The Bramber Castle Caves, and it was about the Penrosals. Well, I had actually sold that book to Disney, and I was packing up my car to the trip from Monterey down to Los Angeles to sign the papers for Disney, and suddenly I hear the voice again. It's Seamus. Sit down. We've got a story for you. I said, I can't. I don't have time right now. Sit down. Down now. And so 45 minutes, I wrote 2 of the stories that make up the Obergon Chronicles in 45 minutes. I didn't even have time to think about them. But when you see the length of these stories, it will be impossible for you to believe that one person wrote all of these in longhand in 45 minutes. The 2 stories that came in 1981 were Atalon and Shalma and Chief White Eagle. And they appear to have nothing whatsoever to do with each other. It took me years to realize that these stories are part of the same story. And it is the story of the souls from Obergon that are here on Earth studying. Oh, by the way, I did not sell that Penrosal. I still own the Penrosal, and I'm very glad that I do. I got down there, and they were going to offer me $4,000 for the hardback rights, the screen rights, and the paperback rights to my book. I told them they were crazy and tore up the contract and huffed back to Monterey, threw the Penrosal saga in a drawer. And it wasn't until about a year ago that I realized that the Penrosal saga is actually part of the Obergon Chronicles. But I had not made that connection. I hadn't even made the connection that the Penrosal saga was channeled. I didn't realize that. I thought that I had written it myself. After that happened, I really, I don't know what I did. For about 2 years, I probably just studied yoga, meditated, continued to meet with the voices in my head. But 1982 and 83 are so nondescript, I can't even remember what happened during those years. Then at the end of 1983, I became very ill. I came down with bronchitis, then pneumonia, then I came down with spinal meningitis. And it was during the spinal meningitis that I had an incredible out-of-body experience. I'm getting a little ahead of time. I can remember lying in a dark room in the emergency room at the hospital and hearing the doctor tell my husband, take her home. There's nothing we can do for her. She's either going to die or get well. And so they gave me a bunch of pain pills to take away the horrible, horrible headache. And I went home and laid in bed for about 6 weeks. It was sometime during that 6-week period that I'm lying there. I cannot move my head like this. The pain is so excruciating. I'm lying there and I hear a voice talking to me out of my closet. And the voice is saying, it is time. And I'm going, it is time. It is time. It is time for what? Am I dying? And the voice said, and I'm going, no, I'm not even going to look over there. If it's time for me to die, I'm not going to listen to them, but I'm going to look over there. And the voice again said, it is time. And then it is time. And so finally I looked over at my closet. The closet doors were folding doors. They were opened wide. My closet was no longer a closet. It was a scientific laboratory. There were about five stations, like you have in chemistry labs. And around each of the stations were about 4 people. And they were all looking back. They were waiting for me. They were waiting for me to join them. So I joined them. And then when I got into the room, I saw that we were like in med school, where the operating rooms, and there's all of this viewing gallery and the people in the viewing gallery watching what's going on below. That went on for forever. There must have been millions of people going as far up as I could see. And there were 12 of us in this scientific laboratory. And the man who was teaching it was from India. He had a very strong Indian accent. And he says, I am here to teach you about the holographic nature of the universe. And so he gave us a lecture on the holographic nature of the universe. And this was before, was it Krishnamurti and David Bohm wrote The Holographic Universe? I think they were the authors of that. I may be wrong, though, so don't hold me to it. But this was definitely before that book came out, several years before that book came out. The Indian said, I am now going to give each one of you a personal experience in how your body stores memory. Your body stores 3 levels of memory. One is the memory of things that have happened to you. Those are stored at the cellular level. But your body also stores memory that have been passed on to you from your ancestors. And those memories are stored in the... But there is a 3rd level of memory, and it is the atomic akashic memory, the memory of the atoms. The atoms remember everything that they have ever been part of, all the way back to the beginning of the universes. So the very first experience that he was going to give us was one of a memory that was in our cells, and how we can transform these type of memories, taking the emotional charge off of those memories. So he had each one of us close our eyes and just breathe deeply. And, I didn't see what he was doing to the other 11 people there. All I remember is what he did to me, and he put his hand on my head. Well, nobody put their hands on my head. I hated that. I could not stand that. I can remember when I'm 4 or 5 years old, the Baptist minister wanted to baptize me. First thing he did was put his hand on my head. I kicked him. I bit him. I did everything that you could imagine to that man to keep from being put underwater in his, portable swimming pool that he baptized us in. And he looks at me and says, oh, poor little dear, you're just afraid of the water. You can't swim. And I said, I can too swim. I just don't want you to touch me. So I'm 5 years old. Needless to say, my mother never took me back to that church again. I became a Presbyterian. Well, I'm going through all of those emotions, and I'm hearing kind of like the voices in my head again, and the hand on my head, and I'm panicking, and I'm panicking, and I'm panicking, and I'm feeling spiders crawling all over me, and I am scared to death. I'm going into a panic attack. Then I hear me screaming. I hear my brother saying, I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. She's just in the wood box. There's nothing wrong with her. And suddenly I remembered when I was about 4 years old, my brother had put me in the wood box with all sorts of spiders and bugs. And he smashed the lid of the wood box down on my head. And that's where the memory was stored, in the top of my head. That was why when anybody touched me there, I immediately got angry, then I got afraid, and I fought whoever it was that touched me on the top of the head. Well, again, I'm hearing the voices, and I'm being told to breathe through it, breathe through it, breathe through it. Suddenly I remembered that my brother didn't put me there. I put myself in the box. My brother and I were playing hide and seek. My brother found me and sat on the box. I couldn't get out of the box. I was the one that put myself in the box, but I couldn't get out of the box. So I start screaming, going hysterical, and my grandmother finds me, punishes my brother for it, but releases me. Okay, I breathed through it. I discovered a very difficult situation in my personal life, realized that it hadn't realized what had started it, and that it had been totally misunderstood by my unconscious. And then I opened my eyes and I saw that all of the 11 other people that were there in the room with me, I could tell by the expressions on their faces that they too had gone through something equally traumatic. Well, the next thing that he did was he led us through a DNA memory. And I find myself, he leads us through this, meditation. And I find myself in the woods, pine trees, big, huge pine trees around. I'm carrying a baby, and I'm with a man that I love dearly. The love of my life. I'm with him. And this is our son. He goes out to find some of the trees that he had cut down, and he put a wedge in and used the sledgehammer, and he was breaking up the logs into firewood. Well, a piece of the wedge flew off, hit me in the lip, and suddenly I've just got blood gushing down. And the man was so devastated that he had hurt me so. He's crying. He grabs the baby so I don't get blood all over the baby. He hands me a handkerchief and takes me back to the house. Well, as the memory goes on, I see the house and I go, oh my God, that's where my parents lived when they were first married. And then I realize, oh my God, I'm my mother. And I'm holding my oldest brother in my arms. That's my father. Well, the minute I saw my mother the next time, I said, Mom, how did you get that scar on your lip? And guess what story she told me? It was the identical story down to the handkerchiefs being given. Okay, well, then came, so we had gone through cellular memory, we had gone through the DNA memory, and the next one was the atomic akashic record. Or I should say the atomic akashic memory, the memories the atoms carry. And he told us to take our middle finger and to hold it directly over our heart chakra. And he said, take the fingernail and dig it in until you feel a little bit of pain. And then pull in every ounce of your attention into that area directly under your fingernail. And so I followed his instructions, and I could see my body coming around like this, going through this portal in my heart chakra, coming out the back as kind of like a stream of light. And then this rushing sound that if you ever saw the movie Contact, and that noise where she was in that chamber, it sounds like jet engines. Well, that's the noise I heard. The tunnel was not white. There was no light. The tunnel was black, and there were the sounds of jet engines. And I have no idea how long that noise continued. But when it was over, I was in the universe. And I was in the body of my 8-year-old body. When I was 8 years old, I was a Templar knight. And I wore white pillowcases with red crosses, and I had garbage cans as my shield and wooden swords that I had built. And so that was the person that was flying out in the universe. And I was enjoying the sense of freedom more than you can imagine. I was doing barrel rolls, I was doing flips, I was doing everything that you could imagine. And then I saw some planets, and I said, oh, those look like interesting places to visit. And so I swooped down, and on one planet, there were deer, just ordinary deer. That was what I thought. So I swooped down and I said, well, I'm going to find out what it's like to ride around in the body of a deer for a while. And so I joined I chose the female deer, and I joined with the female. And I'm leaping over. You can't imagine how exciting it is to be a deer. And, if deer hunting season isn't around, I would imagine. But this was a planet of the deer people. There were no humans. It was only deer. And they were jumping and just enjoying life so much that you couldn't believe